Welcome to the Potter Electric Signal webinar on fire alarm programming for R1 and R2 occupancies. I'm James Brennan. I'll be your presenter today, the Senior Fire Systems Trainer here with Potter, NICET Level 3, based out of St. Louis, Missouri, and I've been in the fire alarm industry for almost 20 years. So first thing I would like to discuss are facts and figures relating to fire and CO deaths and injuries. Now, every year we see anywhere between 3,500 and 4,500 fire deaths. On the CO side, those numbers are a little bit more stable. We're around about 2,200 CO-related deaths per year. When we're talking about fire incidents, about 1.4 million fire incidents every year. Civilian injuries are going to be about 15,000, with the vast majority of those being in residential occupancies. Injuries are going to be about 3 to 4 times more common than death. Now, when we're talking dollars, we're looking at about $25 billion a year in direct property damage, again with residential accounting for the vast majority of that. Causes of fires in homes are generally going to be cooking, heating equipment, or some sort of electrical malfunction. On the CO side, we're going to see about 50,000 emergency room visits a year. It's about 50-50 between accidental and intentional CO injuries and deaths. And the vast majority of those accidental injuries come from power outages and associated events. So when we see something like a winter storm or a hurricane, people are generally going to use a generator to keep appliances going in the home, and misuse is going to account for the bulk majority of those accidental CO injuries. People putting generators in garages or in places where we might be blowing that exhaust back into the building is going to be the major contributing factor there. Every day, U.S. fire departments respond to approximately 3,500 incidents. Every year, we see about 50,000 Americans go to the emergency room due to carbon monoxide poisoning. Virtually all of these incidents occur in residential environments. Working alarms will cut this risk in half. So now I'd like to talk about codes and specifications. First thing I want to do is some definitions. Let's talk about what is an R1 occupancy. According to IBC, an R1 occupancy contains sleeping units where the occupants are primarily transient in nature. So transient generally means that the occupants are going to stay 30 days or less. NFPA basically says the same thing. It says buildings or portions thereof that provide sleeping accommodations for more than 16 persons and are used for transient or permanent residence. Now, when we look at an R2, IBC says occupancies containing sleeping units or more than 2 dwelling units where the occupants are primarily permanent in nature. So now when we're talking about this, we're going to be looking at apartment complexes, condominiums, things of that nature. Permanent nature per IBC generally is going to mean that occupants are going to stay longer than 30 days. NFPA also says that we have some requirements for SLC performance. What they say is a single fault on a pathway connected to addressable devices must not result in the loss of devices in more than one zone. For this requirement, each floor of a building is considered a separate zone. Additionally, where a floor is subdivided by fire or smoke barriers and the fire plan permits horizontal relocation between zones on the same floor, each subdivided area is considered a separate zone. So in a lot of applications, this means that we might want to look at doing a separate SLC loop card for each one of these zones, because in terms of wiring, it's going to be a lot less complicated than putting isolation modules throughout our system. One of the other NFPA 72 requirements is going to be 520 hertz audible signaling for those areas where people are going to be sleeping. A very interesting study was done by a Dr. Dorothy Bruck at Victoria University in Australia, and what they found was that 520 hertz is going to wake people more effectively than the traditional 1K alarm. Not only that, but it's significantly better at waking children, older adults, and other at-risk groups. And those at-risk groups might be people that are inebriated or under the influence of drugs, anything else where we might have people that are more difficult to wake up. So based on that, NFPA 72 is going to require that 520 hertz tone in sleeping areas. Let's take this a step further. NFPA 72 says that fire needs to indicate with a 3-pulse temporal pattern in accordance with ANSI 3.41. Carbon monoxide must use a distinctive audio pattern from that fire evacuation signal. So that's going to be a repeating 4-pulse temporal pattern. So this is very broad brushstrokes. I would like to say here that this does not apply to every R1 or R2 occupancy. But a lot of things that we see are that smoke and CO detectors are going to behave in single or multi-station manner. Let's talk about what those mean. Single station would be like a 9-volt smoke alarm that you would have in your home. If that specific smoke detector goes active, only that sounder base, in this case, is what is going to sound. We're going to talk quite a bit about sounder bases through this because more often than not, sounder bases is what we're going to use in these R1 and R2 occupancies. Now, multi-station would be a little bit more like the 120-volt smoke alarms that we might see in newer residential occupancies. And the concept there would be if the smoke alarm goes off in the living room, it's also going to sound in the bedrooms. So we might see that single or multi-station behavior in R1 and R2 occupancies. The concept here being that we're only going to sound within that specific area, that specific unit, hotel room, apartment, etc. We're not going to sound general alarm. Now, to that point, multiple activations might sound general alarm. So if we go into that R1 in a hotel, quite often what we see is if any 2 smoke detectors and sleeping rooms are active simultaneously, then we're going to sound general alarm. On the R2 side, we might say multiple activations by unit. So we might say if the smoke detector in the living room and the smoke detector in the bedroom are both active simultaneously, now we're going to sound general alarm. There's also some times where we see multiple activations by unit in public space, but the reality there is we're generally going to be sounding general alarm on those public space devices anyhow. So the big takeaway here is that we may have any number of specs. We need to read that very, very carefully when we're looking at these R1 and R2 occupancies. So I do have a couple of tricks that I would like to show. The first one I think that I would like to show is going to involve Microsoft Excel. So here we have an Excel sheet. When we look at it here, there's some random things that are on the sheet. So let's talk a little bit about how we can use Excel within the Potter Fire Panel programming software. So Excel really likes to do autocomplete functions. It likes to assume things that you would like. So let's start with our SLC first. I'm going to come over here and select on the right-hand side where it says first floor SLC. And if you'll notice currently, I have that big white cross. That's going to be my cursor on this screen. As I get closer to that bottom right corner, you're going to notice that that's going to change to that solid black. Now, if I left click and drag down, you'll see on that little pop-up there that it's telling me that it wants to do an auto completion. So that black cross means that I'm in this autocomplete mode. For the example I'm going to do today, let's just go with 6 floors. So now when I pull that down and I release it, I didn't have to type first floor SLC, second floor SLC, third floor SLC, etc. All of that has been done for me. Now those cells are currently selected, so if I press Control C, those are now being copied. And you'll know that we're copying those cells because you'll see that dashed line running clockwise around that group of cells. So now let's go to our software. Here's our software. And the first thing I want to do is add multiple SLC loop cards. This is going to be what's going to help me with that SLC performance requirement that we just discussed from NFPA 72. So when I'm here in my software, we can scroll down. There's my SLC loops. I can add a device. It's worth pointing out that the built-in SLC loop is going to report as loop 0. Now let's name those loops. I can name my built-in SLC. I can name the rest of these loops. And the advantage to that is if I have a problem with that loop card, the name that I give this card will show on the enunciator. So if I just single click here on name, I do not want to double click. See, if I double click, I've got the contents of that cell selected. I do not want to do that. I just want to single click on the name column there, and then if I press Control V, I now paste the names that I just copied in that Excel sheet here into the names of these devices. So while we're looking at this now, let's go to points and let's pay attention to our device column. Built-in power supply. In this case, this is an AFC 1000. I have those 6 NAC circuits and 4 IOs. But then now my built-in power supply, the device shows as first floor SLC. If we scroll down here, 127 points per card. We roll over. There's my second floor SLC. Keep going down. You'll see third, fourth, etc. So now we've named all of those loops. So now let's go back to our Excel and let's talk about what else I've got going on here across the rest of the screen. A1, I just simply typed the word room. That's all I did was I typed room. Next to the right is a very interesting equation. Normally, when we are doing autocomplete in Excel, it wants to count full base 10. And what I mean by that is 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, etc. Okay. Now, when we're naming rooms in a, let's say, hotel, for this example, we're going to do a 6-story hotel. When we're naming rooms, we probably don't want to start with 1. We're generally going to have 101, 102, 103, etc. So this equation is a floor math equation. And for this example, I'm going to say that I have 40 rooms per floor. So when you look there, you'll see that I've got that /40 on the front side of the equation as well as on the back side. And the rest of this is basically saying we're going to start at 101, and then we are going to count to 140, and then we're going to roll over to 201, 202, 203, etc. So we're not going to count past 40. We're going to roll over. To the right of that, I have a simple combining equation. This says equals A1 and quote, space, quote, and B1. The reason why I wrote this combining equation like this is if I don't put in that and quote, space, quote, and B1, let's take a look at what happens there. So we're just going to get rid of the space. We'll leave in the ampersand. I press enter. I do not have a space between room and 101. So in order to accomplish that, quote, space, quote, and now puts that space in there for me. So now this says room 101. When I move to the right, that just simply says smoke. To the right of that, it simply says CO. I've done another combining equation over here in H and I. Now I'm saying give me C1 and smoke, or give me C1 and CO. And this is going to prove very useful for naming points and zones. So now if I select where it says room, press and hold shift, and select over here where it says room 101CO, I've now selected that entire row. When I mouse up and I get that black cross, as I bring it down, you're going to see it doesn't want to preview what that autocomplete's going to be. And that's fine. But now we're going to be able to run this down. So if I'm going to do a 6-story hotel with 40 rooms on each, I need 240 lines. So let's run this down. Here we go. There's 240. Release that left mouse button. And all of that has been named for me. Now, a lot of this stuff we're not going to use, but we're going to pay special attention to the C column, the H column, and the I column. So to that point, let's go and do our points. So I'm going to select room 640. Actually, I'm not. Let's do the first floor first. So we're going to grab up through 140, Control C copies. We're going to come back here to our points. And there's a reason why I'm doing this a little different. We're going to go here to name, point 1, Control V. And now all of those points have been named. There's a reason why I named all of these points first. And that is because if I name the point before I assign a type, watch what happens. In this case, we're going to do PCDs, so photo CO detectors, in split mode for all of these rooms. So I can select the type there on the top, scroll down to 140, press and hold shift, select that. Now they're all selected. And now I can right click, put all of them PCD in split mode, and you'll notice that they've all been named now. So I didn't have to type any of those names, and I certainly didn't have to type them multiple times per point. So now the first floor points are named. Let's do our second floor points. Same thing. Select 201. We're going to scroll down. We're going to find 240. Press and hold shift. Select 240. Control C is going to copy. Go back to our software, and now I'm going to look for the second floor SLC card. The reason why I'm doing this is just subjective, but I like front loading all of these private space points on the front of the card. I find it much easier to program, and from an installation standpoint, it doesn't particularly matter. Those guys are just going to look at the address and they're going to assign the address, accordingly. So now Control V, once I've selected in that name column, Control V, and those are all named. I can come here, come down, we'll grab down to 240, press and hold shift, right click, PCD in split mode. So now let's put all of these on sounder basis. So you can see here where it says sensor only. When I click that down arrow, you can see I have the option for sensor with relay base, or sensor with sounder base, low frequency sounder base. As far as Potter's concerned, there is no difference between a sounder base and a low frequency sounder base. So now I'm going to click here where it says sensor only. I'm going to scroll up top. I'm going to get to that 101 sensor only. I'm going to press and hold shift, select sensor only. I'm going to right click and change them all to sounder bases. So now let's put all of these detectors on sounder basis. You'll see here under the function column where it says sensor only. If I click that down arrow, you can see I have the option to put that detector on a relay base or on a sounder base, low frequency sounder base. So let's put it on that sounder base. I could do this just one at a time, and you can see where that will come down. But again, I have this ability to make that bulk change. So let's select here under function, Let's scroll up. There's 101. Let's press and hold Shift. Let's select that function again where it says sensor only. Now that whole column is selected. I can right click and I can put those all on sounder bases. And as we scroll down now, you can see that I have 3 subpoints for every one of those detectors. I've got my sounder base, I've got my smoke detector, I have my CO detector. And again, I was able to do all 40 of these points very, very easily. So now let's go down and do the second floor. We've already named those. We've put them on PCDs. So I'm going to select the top one. We're going to scroll down to 240. Press and hold Shift. Select sensor only. Now they're all selected. Right click. We'll put them on a sounder base. So for the purposes of this, let's say that we want all of our smoke detectors to be supervisory and that we want our alarms, or I'm sorry, our COs to be alarm. And we see this quite a bit in hotels. We want that supervisory behavior and our smoke detectors in the rooms. And the reason why there is because maybe there's a microwave in the room, somebody burns a bag of popcorn. We don't necessarily want to roll trucks on that. We don't want to roll the fire trucks. So what's going to happen is that detector goes active, supervisory signal at the panel. It dials the central station. Central station calls the premise. Person at the front desk will perform an investigation. So now we have effectively human alarm verification involved in that process. So doing smoke detectors as supervisory is not necessarily a bad thing in those environments. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about that supervisory behavior in a little bit. But for now, let's just make our smoke detector supervisory. We would do that here in our supervisory column. But again, I can go through and manually check this box on each one of those, or I can do something else. Up here at the top, I have this thick red line, and when I mouse over it, I go from a standard arrow to that pointy finger. When we click it, when we have the pointy finger, we open up an option that says Group by Area. This is where we can do some sorting that can make a lot of this work very, very easy. So my smoke detectors photo sensor is in the type column. So now if I left click, hold, drag, and drop where it says type up into that group by area box and then release it, I get a much different view. I can see my full detector, my pad PCDs. In split mode, there's 80 of them. And underneath that, I have 80 photo sensors and 80 sounder bases, 80 CO detectors. So it's going to do them alphabetically. But I only want to look at my smoke detectors. I'm not worried about those COs. So now I can click the triangle here next to that, and all I'm showing now is the photo sensor. So now if I want to make all of these supervisory, again, select in the supervisory column, we scroll down to the bottom, press and hold Shift, select the bottom one, right click, check. Now all of those smoke detectors are supervisory. To get back to our normal view, we would select type, drag it down where you see that X now above the pointer, and you release it. So now when we scroll down our points list, you can see only the smoke detectors have been made supervisory. My CO detectors are all still alarm. I'm going to take this one step further. We have this LED blink disabled. Very nice feature for those sleeping rooms. This only impacts the polling portion of the LED. So when this detector is normal, that LED is going to flash once every 4 seconds. If we disable this LED blink, it's going to turn off that polling LED. If the detector goes active, that LED will rapidly flash 4 times a second. This checkbox will not impact that behavior. So let's turn off the LED on the detector, and the sounder base also has that polling LED, so let's turn that off as well. Select up top. We're going to scroll down here to 140. There's our last one right there. Press and hold Shift, select. All of them are selected. We right click, we hit check. Now we've turned it off on all of those devices. And I like doing all of this stuff up front because there's going to be quite a few things that we're going to be touching here in the sleeping rooms where pull stations, smoke detectors and hallways, stuff like that, we're probably not going to turn off the LED. We're not going to make them supervisory. So that's why I like to front load that loop card with those sleeping room points, because if I'm going through and adding all of those rooms first, much, much easier. So now as we come down here to our second floor, you're going to see we've already made those smoke detectors supervisory because we looked at all of the photo sensors on our system. So let's turn off the LEDs on that as well. We'll scroll down here, grab that last one, right click, check. The reason why I need to do these separately is because I could be turning off the LEDs on these unused devices, which later I'm going to come back and make those public spaces. So I need to be very cognizant of where I'm at and what I'm doing. So there's our first and second floor sleeping room detectors all built. Everything is built. The nice thing about this is I was able to do all of that very, very quickly. If I wasn't taking time to explain this, I could probably have had these 80 points built in less than 60 seconds. So now let's go to zones. Now, when we go to zones, of course, we're going to have a lot of our general alarm stuff, all of that's going to be lower zone numbers, and that is because when the panel goes into alarm, it starts at zone 1 and it runs through every zone looking for every zone the associated point is in. Whatever the lowest numerical zone number that point is in, that zone name will display on the screen. So when I'm doing these private areas, I like to put the zone numbers up higher. So let's go ahead and add our zones. But right now, we have a total of 80 rooms, 40 on the first floor, 40 on the second floor. And in those rooms, we have a smoke and a CO detector. So I'm going to need, if I'm going to do single station behavior, I'm going to need 160 zones. 80 rooms, 2 different behaviors. It's going to be 160 zones. So I'm going to go ahead and let's start with, I want to go ahead and start up at zone 1000. These large panels, AFC 1000, IPA 4000, have 1500 software zones. So when you're doing these single or multi-station behaviors, you're going to have a lot of zones. They're not necessarily going to be complicated, but you're going to have a lot of zones. So I'm going to go ahead and segregate these. We're going to start at zone 1000. I want a total of 160 zones. So there we go. There's our 160 zones. We're able to add all of those easily. Now, let's go ahead and name our zones. This is where we're going to come back to Excel. This is why I had this smoke and the CO portion also fully named out. That's going to be for my zones. So let's go to 240 smoke. We'll grab that. Same thing applies. Press and hold shift. Grab up to the top. Control C copies. Now we come back to our software. Let's grab. I'm gonna show you something here real quick. The software has this very nice feature. If I only select 6 zones, now I copied 80. If I only select 6 zones and I come here to the name column and again just single click and I press Control V, I get an option that says, hey, you're trying to put more names in than we have available. You're going to lose some data. Do you want to continue? Nope. Obviously I made a mistake, so I'm going to go ahead and click cancel. Inversely, we're doing 80 zones, so let's come up here and select too many. We're going to go to 1103. When I do that, and I do that same thing, so now single click and name, press V. It names all of those, but notice how when we ran out of data, it just stopped. It didn't name anything extra. That's fine, so we can go ahead and select too many here, but now I want to select just those smoke zones. So we're going to get 240, we're going to select that. Now all of these are available up here in my rules, and all of the zones have been named. So my smoke detectors are supervisory, so that means I need a supervisory style zone. So click Style. We're going to scroll down to the bottom. Same thing, press and hold Shift, click, right-click, make them all supervisory. We're going to leave our alarm count the way that it is. And on these smoke detectors, again, broad brush strokes. I'm going to say let's leave them silenceable, but let's make them non-latching. So this will behave a lot like a 9-volt smoke alarm at home. If you wave a piece of paper in front of that smoke detector and you clear the chamber, the sounder base is going to silence automatically. So now we can come here to latching, select on the bottom, press and hold Shift, select up top, right-click, uncheck. Now all of those zones are silenceable and non-latching. Coming across here, output pattern is going to be the pattern that sounder-based power circuit is going to pulse when that zone goes active. Well, these are smoke detectors. We want them to be T3. So same thing applies. Press and hold Shift, right-click. I get several options. I'm going to choose temporal 3. One thing I did forget to do was build a couple of sounder-based power circuits. So again, we can go back to our Excel. I can just type in first floor. I need to be aware that I'm only allowed 16 characters here. We'll do the same thing. We'll pull that down. Let's just say we're going to do, one sounder-based power circuit per floor. So now we've got those all selected. Now I can come here, NAC 1. I've named all of those. I can now give them all the function of sounder-based power. And there we go. So now let's talk about building out our zones. We can bulk load points. So I want to grab all of my first floor zones. You can see here I've got all 40 of those smoke detector zones built. And if I grab that first floor sounder-based power, drag it into the zone, it's now in every one of those zones. As I click through my zones, it's added to every one of those zones. We can do the same for the second floor. We'll come down here to 201, run all the way down, 240 smoke, drop the sounder-based power in. Now it's added into all of those zones. Now, let's talk about how to build the zone. We have this ability to do that sorting, that group by area here as well. But I want to show you a trick here. If these were just smoke detectors, which we see quite often in hotels, I could come up here and I could go to this function. When I sort by function, it's that sensor width, and it appears that it's just going to be that detector, which it is. Here's the thing to be cautious about. I can bring that over, but it adds the CO detector. But it also brought the sounder base and the smoke detector. That's okay, because I'm going to show you a trick on how we can undo that. So 101, 102, 103. This is where we do have to do a little bit of manual labor. We're not able to go bulk here. 105, 106, 107. So I think that's enough. So now let's come back up here. We're going to select all of those rooms. And when we do, when we look at our points here, all of the points in those selected zones are down here. So look at what I can do very easily. Again, I get that ability to group by area. Go to type. Now I can go in and I can delete just my CO detectors. So I have the ability to bulk delete as well. So now you're going to see here in those zones we only have the sounder base and the photo detector. So now when I go to 101, sounder base, smoke detector, sounder base power. So now when that smoke detector goes active, the sounder base power circuit's going to pulse temporal 3. Sounder base will pass it along. 102. Same thing. 103, 104, 105. So now what we have is the ability to delete points quickly. So this is pretty nice because I can run through pretty quickly here, and I can just add all of this stuff into these appropriate zones. And what used to be a lot of hunting and pecking through the list now becomes pretty automated when we understand how to use these tricks. So, now I'm all the way up to 120. Same thing again. I'm going to do that group by area. I'm going to go by type. Let's come all the way back up top here. So now we're going to select them all. And you can see that automatically updates. I went from 1 item to 13 items. We'll expand that CO. Come here. Press and hold Shift. Select the bottom. Hit delete. Now they're all gone. So now, and sometimes our view gets a little wonky like this, we can always go up here to Window, reset Windows layout. It's going to snap us back to that default view. There we go. So now I can select these rooms independently, and you can see where that bulk add becomes very nice. Of course, I haven't done 121 yet, but you can see how we could do some pretty large panels fairly quickly when we understand these tricks. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. For more information about Potter products, please visit our website at pottersignal.com. To access additional training resources, check out our online training portal at academy.pottersignal.com. Stay connected with us on social media for the latest updates and news.